Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to be doing a Remnant 2 build. This build is going to be focusing on crit and damage and especially weak spots. Alright, so now we are at my character and this is what I use. This is the augments and the amulet I use. So first things first, we're going to start off. Since this is a handler, I'm going to tell you what handler I use. I like to use the support dog. Now, I could have used the attack dog, which does boost your damage, I think, by 20%. However, considering the fact that it's only 20% and you don't really get anything else besides that, I like to just go with the support dog to try to help my longevity with life, which is a howl grants 2% of max health per second and 25% increased movement speed for all allies within 20 meters. Me, in my personal opinion, I think this is the best one. You could go for the attack dog just for the extra 20% damage. But since we're already doing a lot of damage, we don't really need that damage boost. And it's just nice to have an extra backup for health if you ever need it. And since it's a 72-second cooldown, it's not that long. It's just above a minute. So it's not that long, and we don't really have to wait that long for it again. So I would recommend using this, and that movement speed will help you in the long run, especially for creating distance against really fast bosses or enemies. Alright, so now we're on our armor. Now the armor system in this game isn't like how it was in the first game, where armor not only had stats to it, but it also made you resilient to certain things. They took out the stat problem and just kept the resilience. So now I like to think of it as armor is really only cosmetic. So we obviously, this armor has 13 armor, 8 weight. So that's still the same, and the resilience is still the same. But as you can see, there's no stats. There is no damage boost increase. There is no health boost increase. No speed increases. This is my relic, the Ruined Heart, which is on use. Increases health regeneration by 5 and generates 500 mod power over 10 seconds. Now, while we're using damage with ranged weapons and not necessarily melee weapons, we are also going to be using a lot of our mods. Mods are... I'm still kind of testing out what mods are better, as it kind of depends on what you like. Me personally, I think I found a mod that I think will be better, but we'll get to that later. So now we have our artifacts. So I have solid range critical damage, ordinary range damage, and crack consumable speed. Now it really depends on what you want. You don't really need the crack consumable speed, but I like to use it just so I can have an extra oomph in my speed, considering it does take a few seconds to use it, and those few seconds you could use to do damage. Obviously these would be upgraded. I don't have these fully upgraded right now, but obviously you'd have these fully upgraded. What I would change is, if you don't want the crack consumable speed and you really just want to focus on damage, then I would either do weak spot damage. This gives you an extra 2% of weak spot damage, which is good. That gives you a lot more damage. That probably gives you like an extra 10 or 20 hits of damage. However, that 20 health doesn't really make a difference, and we're already dealing enough damage. I would like to just have an extra support item for consumable use. Plus, I just think that it's better to have at least 2 of the main ones and then 1 support. It's always nice to have at least 1 support item to help you throughout your journey, and considering that consumable use speed would help you. But if you don't want to use consumable speed and you're thinking, there has to be another one, well, you could do weapon swap speed, weapon spread. Skill cooldown is one that I would also recommend using, considering it will decrease it by a few seconds, which obviously a few less seconds on your skills would be amazing. Skill duration, or reticle spread recovery, or mod duration. Ammo pickups, ammo reserves, modding skill cast speed, consumable duration, obviously consumable use speed, recoil, and mod cost. Obviously, we don't really need the gun ones, which helps against recoil, spread, or alignment, as I'm gonna teach y'all that in a bit. But for what I would use, if you guys don't want, is either mod cost, consumable use speed, skill cooldown is the 3 ones I would recommend using. Especially skill cooldown, if you upgrade it, it'll probably help you in the long run, considering you can probably save a few, like 5 to 6 seconds off your cooldowns, which is 5 to 6 seconds you'll need. All right, now onto my second archetype, which I use the hunter. From some of the builds I use, I see a lot of people use the medic, the challenger, gunslinger, but me personally, I like to use the hunter, considering the hunter also gives us a boost in damage. Now it really depends on what you want to use. If you want to go for more of a if you want to go for more of a distant damage build, then I would highly recommend the Hunter Shroud, which makes you harder to get hit and be seen by enemies. So that allows you to create a sense of distance between you and the enemy. And when you exit Shroud, it applies mark to the enemies within 10 meters and grants an ambush. And ambush increases range and melee damage for 50%. And if you're out of combat, you'll go back into it after almost 1.5 seconds. Me personally, I don't like to really use it, considering I play with my friend all the time, so I don't really need it since he does more of the tanking for me while I do more of the damage dealing. But if you want to have more of a distant build where you feel safer from a distance, then use the Hunter Shroud. But me personally, I like to use the Hunter's Focus because that reduces my weapon spread, recoil, and sway by 75, and it grants me a 25% range in weapon weak spot, plus the crit damage, and while I'm focused, it also still applies mark. So not only am I getting the marked enemies, so I'm dealing more damage to marked enemies, I'm also decreasing my recoil, weapon speed, and I'm getting more crit chance, and I'm getting more weak spot chance by 25%. I think it's way better for the price, considering you do a little more damage and you have more trade-off than you do with Hunter's Shroud. So, Hunter's Mark is one you could also use. This is the first one from the first game. I don't really like it. It allows you to see, and it basically gives you wall hacks, and I personally don't really think it's useful. Pretty much gives you wall hacks, and it gives you ranged and melee damage, and that's about it for 15%. I just think overall the Hunter's Focus is way better than the other two. But if you really want, use the Hunter's Shroud. I personally wouldn't use the Hunter's Mark. I just don't think it's worth it. All right, so now we're on to our amulets. So I like to use the Ankh of Power, which is grants a 50% increase to all damage. Consuming a relic doubles. So every time we consume a relic, we get double the damage for 15 seconds. Now you can bounce between these. I used to use the Death Embrace, which is gain 20% to all damage when health is low. Below 100. You also gain haste when below 50. But since we're kind of going for more of a healing lifesteal build, we're always going to be above 50%, and we're always going to be above 20%. So it doesn't really matter. You could use this, but me personally, I would think this one is better. Or you can use this one, which is taking damage from enemies increases all damage dealt by 25% and reduces all incoming damage by 10%. Last 20 seconds. In my opinion, either this one or the Ankh of Power is your go-to. I like to do this just because it just flat out gives me 50%. I don't have to take damage. I don't have to be at a certain health pool to get it. It just flat out gives me 15 increases to all damage, and it doubles it, which I personally like, considering I like to use my relics just for the mod power. But this one's also good, considering you can just take damage and it increases it by 25% and reduces all damage. So not only do you get a debuff, you get defense upgrade, but you also get to deal more damage. And it also lasts for 20 seconds. So in my opinion, it really depends on what you want. Me personally, I just like to get the flat out damage boost. I don't have to take damage, be damaged. I can always just have my boost. So really depends on what you want to do, but I'd either bounce between the power, the fetish, or the embrace. All right, so now we're moving on to the rings. So the rings, I like to use the kinetic cycle stone, the Stone of Expense, Vestige of Power, and Wax Sealed Ring. So let's go over these real quick. So the Wax Sealed Ring, killing blows increases range and melee damage by 4% for 15 seconds. It stacks 3 times. So you're always going to be killing things and you're always going to be hitting things. No matter what, you're always going to be killing things. This isn't necessarily useful in a boss fight, but normally during boss fights, they do normally have enemies that get summoned, so you will still be able to kill things for the most part. So you're always gonna be dealing damage and killing things, and every time you kill something, it increases it by 4%, and it can stack 3 times. So in my opinion, I think this is a wonderful damage increase, considering you're always gonna be killing things. 1, 2, 3, it doesn't matter. You're always gonna be killing things, so extremely useful. This one, the Power Ring, it's pretty good if you're not taking damage, but if you're good at dodging and learn the mechanics of every boss, you're not gonna be taking damage as much. So this one is after 7 seconds of not being damaged, increases ranged and melee damage by 10%. In my opinion, I think this is a really good ring, as this is really good for starting out your adventure. So when you immediately start out your adventure, you're not taking damage and you're out of combat. So you're immediately going to have your range and melee damage increased by 10%. And even when you're out of and even when you're in damage, when you let's say if you want to use the Hunter Shroud, which this ring could bear well with it, if you want to use the Hunter Shroud, this will bear extremely well with it, considering you will be harder to target. But yeah, overall a pretty decent ring. You could probably change it out for another one, which I will go over. All right, now we have the Expanse Stone, which is increases damage by 12%, reduces all other damage dealt by 6. This ring kind of has a caveat where you decrease your base damage by 6%, but you increase your other damage, which is ranged, your guns, by 12%. In my opinion, I think it's a good trade-off because because this amulet right here cancels that out. So this amulet right here gives you a 15% damage increase. This goes to 6%. So when you activate this ring, you'll go into the negative. You're going to go into a negative 6% damage, considering your damage increasing your damage. However, this amulet decreases that to 9%. If we look at our stats, scroll down, you see our damage is now 9% instead of it being negative 6, because this amulet will cancel this out. But you also get your increased range damage. So in the end, you're not really losing anything. You're kind of more gaining things. All right. Now this one, I kind of like to have a support. I could have went for another damage ring, but I want a more supportive ring, which is increases mod and skill cast speed. So you can't dodge out of your hunter's vision and your support dog click. You can't cancel out of them. So if you are caught in the middle of the animation, you're caught in the middle of the animation. So I like to have this mod just to have have more of a speed to it, so I don't have the trouble of getting caught in the middle of my animation while I'm trying to do it. Because there's been a lot of times where it's just bad timing, where I snap my fingers to get the heal, to get the speed increase, and a boss does a move that I have to dodge and I can't dodge it. So I would 100% recommend using the Cycle Stone just for the extra mana still cast speed. All right. So now we're going to go into over what other rings you can. If you want to replace this ring, so let's say you're in a boss fight, you're not killing targets, you want to replace the ring, I would either replace it with increases the range of firearms, as there's no trouble having range, or I would increase it to the encrypted ring, which is using a mod regenerates 10% of max health over 10 seconds, can stack up to 30 seconds. This, you're always going to be using your mods every time it's available. I highly recommend using your mods, because if you use your mods more often, you get to have this, and you can stack it up to 30 seconds. So as long as you use your mods, you get health back. So I highly recommend this ring if you're in a boss fight. All right, so now on to our traits. So the reason why we are not going to focus more on that ranged ring is because we are going to have long shot, which just increases our range by a large margin. Anyways, we already have a lot of range, so we don't need it. We don't need a range ring. We don't need to focus on our range. We already have ideal range. And now we have kinship, which is just damage reduction to friendly fire and how much you receive and how much you deal to friendly fire. This isn't necessarily a big thing, considering we don't really friendly fire our dog often, and it's useful for teammates if you have trouble hitting them. So if you play with friends, then obviously you can't get rid of this. It's your archetype, but still, it's still really good, but it's not really going to affect anything. But yeah, these are our two archetypes. We have long shot and kinship. Obviously, maxed out vigor. Vigor is your health. You always want to max out your health. Stamina, I would either half it or hit it to 8. Me personally, I would have halved it, but I like to just have it at 8, just to make sure I have a little oomph of stamina left when I'm fighting. We're gonna have spirit, which is our mod power generation. So this is how much energy we do to generate our mods. And this is extremely useful. I would highly recommend just boosting this up to level 10, just so you can have as much mod generation as possible, because we want to spam our mods as much as possible. Now, we have expertise. Reduces skill cooldowns. This is also really good, as this will decrease our skill cooldowns probably from 70 seconds to maybe 60. So I would highly recommend using this mod, as like I said, you can spam your skill cooldowns. Amplitude, which is just the AoE size. This is for our melee weapon. Our melee weapon is the Dreamcatcher, which is I'll go over in a bit. Now we have Barkskin. Barkskin is just half it, just so you can get some damage reduction. So you're not taking the max amount of damage, you're taking half the amount of damage for the most part. I like to have it just as a backup, just in case just to spread myself thin between battles, so I can outlast most. Handling, the reason why you don't really want anything that decreases recoil, increases range, or decreases spread is because we have weapon handling, which just reduces weapon spread and recoil by 20%. I used to have this leveled up to max, but then I got rid of it, and I halved it for footwork, which is aim movement speed. You don't really need an aim movement speed, but it's still nice to have that movement with you when you're on the run, especially when you're fighting a boss that requires a lot of movement. It's nice to be agile. Now we have Siphoner, which is max lifesteal. Highly recommend having lifesteal, considering we are trying to go for more of a lifesteal build with damage. Wayfarer is not, it's more of a support thing where you just get a 10% movement increase for ladders, vaulting, and evading. So it really depends on what you want to do. You can put this into bark skin, you can put this into amplitude, you can put these two into endurance if you want max out endurance. It really doesn't matter what you want, but I just like to have a little extra oomph in my speed when it comes to climbing ladders, vaulting, and just waiting. All right, so now we're saving the best for last, which is our weapons. So our weapons are purely subjective and situational. Me personally, I like to use the Black Maw, the Dreamcatcher, and the Tech 22. Obviously, these would be max level, so don't worry about the levels. So right now, I would say the Black Maw is better than it always has been. It is severely overtuned, really good. It is way better than it was in the first game. And I highly think anybody who's not using it is severely missing out on a lot of damage and a lot of just overall good performance. But if you don't want to use this, you can use the Night Stalker or the Nightfall. The Nightfall isn't a bad weapon. It does extreme amount of damage. I'm talking about 600, 400 base damage just in general. Extremely good damage. However, it comes with a 10 magazine pool, so it doesn't fire for long. So you're going to be running out of ammo a lot, and it has pretty decent fire rate, so you're going to be running out of ammo a lot. However, what makes up for that is its status effect, its mod, which is enter the Nightmare Realm. Nightfall gains infinite ammo, a 25% fire rate increase, 10% lifesteal, and become fully automatic. The wielder becomes significantly harder to hit while moving. Disables other weapons and skills for the duration and or until Dreadwalker is deactivated. Lasts 10 seconds. Now, this gun is extremely good with Dreadwalker. If you can somehow get your mod generation really fast and get this thing fast at pretty much every mag, this thing will be extremely good. But however, I like to have more of a higher magazine. Now we're doing a little less damage, but we have a higher magazine and a faster fire rate. And we have our Skewer 2.0, which is Fire Wretched Spear, which embeds itself on contact. Spear deals 408.8 damage on hit, rapidly dividing inside the target until bursting, dealing a 457.8 damage to all targets. Spear embeds the environment, remain in place for 10 seconds. I 100% think this is, in my opinion, better than the Nightfall, but I do like to bounce between the weapons on specific boss fights. So there are some boss fights where I'll use the Nightfall, and then there are some boss fights where I'll use the Black Maw. So in my opinion, there is really no good definitive answer on what weapon you should use. I would just say use the Nightfall and the Black Maw as your main weapon. Your melee weapons, Dreamcatcher. The reason why you just want to use the Dreamcatcher is after dealing 400 damage, charge attacks will release a Dreamwave flowing outwards of 20 meters and returning to the caster. But that's not what we're here for. What we're here for is the Dreamwave applies slow to all targets for 10 seconds and grants a stack for each enemy affected. Each stack grants 2% of all damage and plus 2% movement speed, which lasts 15 seconds. This is extremely useful. When you're able to get 400 damage, you can use this ability on enemies, which is going to allow you to just stacks damage on you, which obviously will take as much damage as possible, and while also being supportive since it stacks slow. So the enemies are slower, so they're easier to hit. Now, for my pistol, I'm bouncing between them, so it really depends, but I'm kind of sticking to the Tech 22 just for the fact that we have our healing shot. So I know we have more of a lifesteal healing build, and you can kind of rely on your relic and your healing and your dog, which is a lot of heals. But just for fast heals, for in the pinch, the healing shot is really good. And the Tech 9 has fast fire rate and deals a lot of damage while in that fire rate. Since my level's 4, I'm dealing a constant 70 to 80 damage a hit. So it really depends on what you want to do. I would also use the Enigma. The Enigma is really good for ad clear and clearing a bunch of targets at once, and it does really good damage. So I can't really say use one definitively, so I would either bounce between the Enigma or the Tech 9. So it really depends on what you want to use. So yeah, that is my build right now. It is not the best thing. It is not the best damage build. There's probably plenty out there that are way better than mine. But this is just for my part. This is just my first ever build. I am gonna do more builds in the future. I'm gonna do an armor build hopefully soon. So yeah, this is what I would say is a decent armor, a decent damage build. So if y'all would like, these are the stats I use. These are the things I use. And if y'all like the video, please give it a like and subscribe, and share it with friends if they also want to know a little bit about the game, or just know about what build they want to use. So yes, thank you all for watching, and enjoy the gameplay of this build in action.